Hi, I'm Dr. Alison Kole, sleep medicine specialist and bona fide chronic insomniac. Welcome to the Sleep is My Waking Passion podcast. Remember, knowledge is empowerment, and if applied correctly, it can help you biohack your way to a better night of sleep, just like I did. And today I have a really fun treat. We're going to be talking about toddlers and their sleep. So parents out there with a lot of questions, and I do get them, even though you're coming for your visit yourself, a lot of folks have a lot of questions about toddlers and how to maximize their sleep. And so I decided to internet stalk and find Miss Jemma Munford. She is from the UK. Welcome, Jemma.
Hello, and thanks for having me, Alison. It's great to be here.
So Jemma is a former corporate powerhouse turned mum, because that's how they say it in the UK, which I love, by the way. I wish I had an excuse to use for my kids to call me mummy. I really do. You have two kids, right?
Two kids, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I have a 6 and 8-year-old. So, girl, I feel you. It's such a wonderful age. So, but both of us basically have a passion for the science of sleep. So she has completed training with Lindsay Hookway and Gordon Neufeld and is now a toddler sleep consultant and author of her first book, Swoon. That is a goal for 2024 for me to become an author. So God bless you. I think it's fantastic that you're doing it. The name of her first book, The Better Sleep Blueprint. That's a tongue twister. Some people say that about the name of my podcast. Hilarious. Okay, she is based in Sale, South Manchester. Did I say that correct? Okay. Yep. And she works with families online, and you can work with her too. So I'm going to have a link and the description in the bio and where you can find her. But her website is www.blissedoutbabies.co.uk. What a clever name. You go, girl. All right.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to get started because, yes, I have kids, basically. And mine were, to be honest with you, I feel like maybe I cast some sleep voodoo on them, or they were babies when they knew mommy worked a lot and was in a very sort of ICU pulmonary environment. And they were really toddlers during COVID as well. So I've really been blessed with good sleepers. But you're talking to people who are not blessed with good sleepers. So why don't you start with, one of the most common questions or concerns that you get from families that are reaching out to you for your expertise?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for my clients, the people that come to me, is that by the time you get your child through the first year, you survive the first year of parenthood, that's a huge milestone, right? That big transition into your new life and finding your feet. What usually happens is people tend to expect that by 12 months old or a little bit older that children sleep through the night by that point. In the UK, we get usually somewhere between 9 months to a year of maternity leave, and most parents are heading back to work between that time frame. And to have to go back to work when your child still isn't sleeping and you've had sort of 9 months to 12 months of broken sleep, frustrations, frequent night waking, all the rest of it, it's actually a really big challenge, isn't it, for toddler parents? And speaking from experience, my second child's sleep actually went off the rails at 6 months. She was a gorgeous, wonderful sleeper up until 6 months. But then from 6 months to age 3, she was just my worst, most difficult case study.
Wow.
So I think for lots of parents, you do expect that things have just got better by that point. And actually, for lots of parents, they haven't.
So it sounds like it's an expectation or adjustment of your expectation.
Yeah, I find that a lot. And I think no matter what age of child I work with, and I'm qualified to work with babies right up until 6-year-olds, but whatever age that of the child that I work with, I think sometimes parents do have sometimes unrealistic expectations of what sleep really looks like, and obviously being passionate about the science of sleep, that mismatching what society expects and tells parents should be happening compared to actual sleep biology and development. There's two very different views on what should be happening and what actually happens. So I do find lots of parents have unrealistic expectations of what their children's sleep will look like, which adds to the problems particularly when they go back to work, where they're thinking, my child still wakes 2 or 3 times a night. They're still feeding in the night. We're still, having to rock them to sleep or feed them to sleep at 12 months or plus. And I think that actually that those are still very normal things that we would do for children, but lots of parents think that they shouldn't be doing it by that point because by now they should be sleeping through. And it's a mismatch between what is realistically expected and what society tells parents that their children should be doing. And I do find that's a big challenge.
You had mentioned to me split nights, and you described it as being when toddlers sort of party for a couple of hours in the middle of the night. Tell me about this. What does that look like so that people can sort of learn to identify it? And then what do you do about it?
Yeah, so I would say split nights are one of those real frustrating challenges for night waking. Most parents will say they don't mind if their child wakes up in the night, has a quick feed or a cuddle and goes back to sleep quickly. It's these nights where your toddler wakes up sometimes 2 a.m., round about 2 a.m., and then you just cannot get them back to sleep for at least 2 hours. They're usually wide awake, happy, expecting it to be morning, but you're like, half asleep yourself.
That way, that's for sure.
No, and those nights are really tricky to deal with because there's no way of you getting your child back to sleep. It's just impossible, and you have to sit it out. So sometimes split nights happen during times of development. So when the brain's undergoing different changes linked to things like learning to walk, an increase in verbal skills, anything that's a big kind of gross motor skill, fine motor skill development or verbal things coming in, separation anxiety often. I find that these are times when you get these split nights more frequently. So around 14 months to 18 months. They're particularly common. Sometimes they are just a developmental thing, and actually, like if it's just happening once or twice a week and for a couple of weeks and then it stops, I would just say just kind of carry on, do your best to deal with it in as positive a manner as you can. I used to just take my daughter and go downstairs, put TV on for a while, have a drink, wait till she got tired again, and would go back upstairs at 4:00 in the morning, 4:30, because I was just like, there's no point in battling it in the dark for 2 hours. It's just going to drive you potty, really. So just deal with it in the moment as best you can. There's also a split night that can happen when there's a mismatch in the circadian rhythm and when sleep actually happens. So I see this commonly happening when children have quite an early bedtime, and I'm saying early like this because that's relative depending on children's individual sleep needs. But if you have a child who is napping in the daytime, has a early bedtime, then wakes up for a couple of hours in the nighttime, often what's happening is that the rise in melatonin and the circadian rhythm saying, okay, we need to be asleep for a good amount of time at this time, is not matching to the time they actually fall asleep. So split nights can be challenging to get on top of. And it essentially what we need to do is reduce the amount of time that the children are in bed at night. So that means a later bedtime or an earlier morning. And then fiddle around with the length of the nap and what time they go to sleep. It's quite a difficult thing to kind of get on top of because it is this challenge with the circadian rhythm versus what time they go to sleep. So one option is just sit tight and leave it because it's developmental if it's just once or twice. But if it's every night for a week or 3 or 4 nights a week for a few weeks, then we have to shorten the overnight sleep duration, maybe shorten the nap, and then perhaps get them a little bit earlier in the morning so that we can get the balance of sleep working better. It's a tricky one, split nights.
That is actually really fascinating what you're saying, because we very much would try to do that a bit, even with adults. We talk about, if you're not able to maintain sleep throughout the night, sort of restrict your time in bed. And that might be adjusting when you go to bed, adjusting when you wake up, right? And then minimizing naps during the day. So, it's just, it's funny. I had a conversation the other day with Dr. Nishi Bhopal for her podcast. And what we were discussing was that, in essence, we are kids that grow up to be adults, but a lot of the principles that apply to adults we also apply to kids. And I think sometimes adults forget that. So we go, you need to do this for your children. And you try to do all these specific behaviors, you create patterns around sleep so that your kids will sleep well, and yet then we don't follow those same sort of things. So we all have to follow rules, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I find, and this is again is a society expectation, I'm not sure if it's the same in the US versus Europe, but we certainly have this almost obsession that children need to be in bed and asleep by 7 o'clock in the evening.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and is that the same in the US?
Well, I will tell you, I have had friends who really subscribe to that.
Yeah.
They typically are not complaining that their kids are getting up earlier, so maybe their children truly are longer sleepers, right?
Yes.
My kids really, even when they were in the toddler phase, they sort of were 8 p.m.-ish.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was a decent amount of time. I think in part because I would get home so late from work that to have a couple hours with them was like, it was glorious. So in a way, I was a little selfish. But I certainly, if they wanted to go up to bed, I'm not going to keep them up. But they naturally were like, I'm kind of ready for bed around 8 p.m. I never pushed the 7 o'clock. So I do think it's variable. I've even had parents... honestly, some of them where I'm like, you're really almost chronically restricting your child's sleep because they're not getting him into bed until 9 or 10 o'clock. Now that's crazy. So I didn't realize that was something that was sort of more standard. Yeah. So I think it's kind of all over the board, and I'm basing that primarily solely on just conversations I've had with other moms that are in my circle. So I think we all probably kind of do different things here in the United States. I don't feel like we judge each other based on the sleep time. That I can say. Yeah. You also mention tricky bedtimes, and I love that description because it's basically when your toddler's starting to sort of exert a bit of independence, so they're pushing back on bedtime. Tell us about that, and what are a couple of tricks to the trade to treat these tricky bedtime situations?
Yeah, so this is why I love working with toddlers. I just love the people that they're becoming. They're coming out of the baby phase. You can see those personalities coming out, and communication gets easier in one sense because they can understand more. They can communicate back with us a little bit more. But with that comes the negotiations, the one more story, one more, I need a drink, and onwards. Bedtimes naturally can become difficult with toddlers. So the biggest thing that you will do to improve your toddler's bedtime is work on connection. So it's not just about what time bedtime is and making sure that they're tired enough and not too tired. It's about connecting with your child so that they feel ready for the next separation that they're going to experience, which is bedtime. Toddlers have peaks and troughs in separation anxiety. The world is exciting to them. This newfound independence that they're craving actually can be quite scary for them. So actually they can be a bit, we use the word clingy here in the UK, sort of more needy, more emotionally needy. They don't want to be separate from us as much. Also with, more daycare, more time spent in daycare, different caregivers whilst you're working. Toddlers are experiencing a lot of separations, and obviously bedtime is yet another separation. So the biggest thing that you can do is connect with your child and focus on one-to-one play, ideally. So spending some special time every evening in the lead up to bedtime, focusing just on them, ditch the phone because we're all guilty of kind of half parenting in the evenings.
Yes, preach. That's so key. I think we're just trying to zone out, and we often reach for our phones, and we have to teach our kids what good behavior looks like. Plus, I love that. It's really about them wanting to connect with their parents. That's just, I don't know any parent out there that's not going to resonate with. What great advice. Yeah.
And honestly, I see this as being a fundamental game changer for my clients. Working on building on connection, because not only do they feel more connected, but you feel more connected. And I shared a reel on my Instagram yesterday, just one of my other best tips for bedtime, especially if you're finding it hard to keep your cool with your toddler because your patience is running thin, is meet your basic needs before you go into that bedtime routine. If you go into that bedtime routine and you're hungry or thirsty or need the bathroom, all you're doing is adding more pressure, more stress on your own body to then not be able to handle your toddler's pushbacks, negotiations, and tantrums, whatever might be happening in that bedtime routine, you're not going to cope with that very well if your basic needs are not met before you go into bedtime. So I always say, don't do bedtime hungry with a toddler.
Oh, that is also great advice. Now, can I ask you one more thing related to that? I would suggest, just logically, that you want to engage in activities of play and connection that are really more on the relaxing tone. In other words, it's not the right time to start playing tag in the house and having people run around and increase their core body temperature and kind of get more energetic right before bed. Would that be sort of sage advice, if you will?
Right before bed, absolutely. Sort of take it down a notch, keep the tempo calm, quiet, dim the lights, work on the great sleep hygiene things. So dim lights, cool temperature in the bedroom, and absolutely in the last half hour to 45 minutes, just keep it nice and calm and relaxed. But don't fall into the trap of keeping your whole evening really calm and relaxed, because you're missing an opportunity to get your child's energy out of the system. What happens, particularly after dinner, after having something to eat, children often need to get rid of a bit of excess energy before you go into the bedtime routine. So my classic evening flow, because I ask my clients not to think of bedtime routine on its own. I like them to think about the whole evening flow, how it happens. So focus on connection, and at the start of the night, that's the start of your evening, that's going to be some one-to-one play, fun, big body play, silly time, tickle time, laugh together, because that is the best way to connect. Then you might do a bath. And by the way, I just want to say, do not bath your child just before they go to bed. If you're going to take them into the bathroom to have a bath right before bed, it's the brightest room in the house, isn't it? It's usually got the white spotlight, it's your white furniture, they've got the toys. Toddler baths are not relaxing. You've got the toys in there. It's splashy. It's a sensory experience. In my opinion, if you do that right before bed, your child is really stimulated, and you've got to then calm them down. So if you find your toddler is having a bath right before bed, and then you're trying to get them in their pajamas and get them ready for bed, and they're just losing it, move that bath right to the beginning of your evening. So do it before dinner. Get it done. You've cleaned them. That is the purpose of the bath. And then have the rest of the evening to play and do some more connection stuff after that. But baths right before bedtime for toddlers don't always work great.
And now a quick break. But don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Struggling with sleep? Dr. Kole is here to help. Whether you need a comprehensive sleeping coach program, suspect you have sleep apnea, or simply seek a second opinion, she's available for consultations in New Jersey, New York, California, and Georgia, with more states coming soon. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation today to find out which visit is right for you at AskTheSleepMD.com and start your journey to better sleep with a trusted physician.
If you are liking this podcast, if you're finding it educational, if you are feeling more empowered to go to your doctor with any sleep issues that you might be having to address them, please, please, please lend your support. Make sure that you are liking, following, subscribing. I am available on YouTube. I'm also on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. The website has launched. So we have AskTheSleepMD.com to be your free educational resource. We've added many new blog posts filled with juicy information. If you would like to support the podcast, we now have a way for you to donate. This is a labor of love. I truly enjoy what I am doing. It would be inspiring and truly helpful if you wouldn't mind even so much as donating $1 to keep this podcast going, particularly if you really find this free education a good platform for you and a good resource for you. I also have affiliate links for products that I'm a proponent of, such as Quiet Mind. So please check out the website, sign up, and you will get the latest news, the latest blogs, some sleep tips, and just have a great day and keep listening. Okay, guys, sleep well. I love that because I know a lot of folks are that. They're like, okay, it's time for bed. Let's get into the bath. And logically, just for me, my energy levels are not there to do the bath. And they often, to your point, want to play with toys, etc. And my kids are a little bit older, so they're a little bit more independent. But when they were that age, you really have to watch them quite closely. And then again, they're splashing and laughing and all of that. So we really have just naturally geared it toward, you've got cooties all over you from school. Let's just hop in the bath. And I inadvertently was doing a good thing without even thinking logically that it would improve their sleep. So great advice. This is awesome. So what is your advice for folks that are trying to now kind of wean off the night weaning? I've heard various things just in terms of trying to, almost like sleep train the child to be able to eventually sleep through the night. Do you have any words of wisdom regarding that?
Yeah, so in reality, night weaning does not always mean that they're going to sleep any better. Just putting that out there, because they're still feeding through the night, that's why they're waking. Children don't only wake through the night because they're hungry. So it may not improve sleep. So I would say to the parents who are still feeding in the night, if you're happy to meet your child's needs by giving them a feed, it's quick feed, back down, and if they sleep well, you might decide that that's okay just for now. So you don't be in a rush to night wean. If you're breastfeeding, then night weaning is often easier, and I say it like this, easier, because it's never truly really easy, because obviously it's the most natural way to get children back to sleep, and it's usually the easiest way. So I would say it's usually easier to do closer to 18 months or older if you're breastfeeding, because by that stage children are a bit more able to communicate. You can talk to them about it, you can explain what's going to happen. They're a bit more cognitively able to understand what's going on and kind of be comfortable with those boundaries that you're going to kind of enforce. So choose your timing, so don't do it too early because it's going to be tricky to do. And then you can just do an approach where you maybe reduce how many feeds you're offering through the night, and maybe say to yourself, right, if I'm doing 3 feeds a night, I'm going to tackle the first one. So I'm going to rock you to sleep instead of feeding you, or I'm going to cuddle you, do whatever it takes apart from feeding, and take 1 feed at a time. That usually works quite well with toddlers, just tackling 1 at a time, because naturally hunger is circadian rhythm linked as well, isn't it? So if we've been feeding and eating and taking calories, then the likelihood is that, there is some hunger going on as well. So if you gradually do 1 feed at a time, you're minimizing the risk that actually you've just got a really hungry child, which is going to be really difficult to get them back to sleep. So I would say choose your timing, think about tackling 1 feed at a time, but you will find that you need to settle your child to sleep in other ways. So expect that and lean into offering some additional support in another way, whether that's cuddles, or rocking them, or offering a sip of water or something else in the night. And just really hold firm on your boundaries. Toddlers, whilst they won't necessarily like the fact that you're not doing the usual approach of offering them a feed, toddlers need boundaries, and if you could do that in a really kind and gentle, empathetic way, oh, mummy's here, I know you'd really like a feed right now, but mummy's boobies are closed tonight, or mummy's boobies are asleep, or whatever phrase you use to to describe that feeding relationship. Explain that to them and support them in other ways with kindness and empathy. So they are better placed to understand that the older that they get. So it's easier after 18 months, but it doesn't always mean that they're going to sleep better. It just means that default parent, perhaps, who was doing all the feeds, doesn't, they can tag team with somebody else who can maybe offer some help instead. So it's a very personal choice, night weaning, and when you do it. But personally, I recommend it's easier after 18 months.
And do you suggest, because this is one of the things that sometimes people describe is, and it might be actually pre-toddler, so you'll have to correct me on this, but sometimes kids have difficulty kind of being able to sleep the night. That might kind of be more when they're babies-ish. But do you have any suggestions for folks? Because I've definitely had my fair share of parents that one of the reasons they're so sleep deprived and come to see me is primarily because they're like, but I fall asleep in my toddler's bed, or I fall asleep in my child's bed, and And so the child sort of gets used to this behavior pattern of like they're soothed completely to sleep. And then if they do wake up in the middle of the night, which can happen, and it's not one of these split night parties that are going on, it can be hard for them to learn how to almost self-regulate to get back to sleep. Do you have any advice about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm very much about responsive parenting, gentle strategies, and not kind of Ferber, cry it out type sleep training. So I'm absolutely pro supporting your child to sleep or with sleep for as long as they need it. And yes, there is some evidence that children who are able to fall asleep on their own in their own sleep space don't wake up as much. But also there is plenty of research that from a study a couple of years ago that showed us that actually around 85% of babies will still be waking in the night at 18 months. It's very normal for children to still wake at this age. So don't think you're on your own. Anyone who's out there listening to this who's still got an 18-month-old who's not completely sleeping through the night every single night. What you can do is, if you feel like you want to support independent sleep and don't want to do that in a traditional sleep training way, I classically enjoy to support parents with things like adding in some additional sleep cues. So say, for example, at the moment you're cuddling your child to sleep or you're rocking them to sleep. Instead of doing that just that one thing, so you might just feed them to sleep at the moment, add in rocking and some bum patting and some shushing. So you're then doing 3 or 4 things at the same time to help your child to sleep. And you'll practice this for a little while for bedtime and naps. And what that gives you is somewhere to go when you stop one of them. So if you're feeding your child to sleep at the moment and you want to stop that, you do some feeding, rocking, patting, shushing, and then you can work on stopping feeding before they go to sleep. But you've still got rocking, patting and shushing to help them. And gradually you can just work your way backwards through removing one of these sleep cues at a time, to then get to the point where perhaps all you need to do is shush them to sleep and sit with them. If parents are struggling with the child staying in their own beds, and that's why they end up having to stay with them in the middle of the night and then they end up falling asleep there, I do find that having a floor bed works really, really well for children. So either having a temporary mattress or temporary bed that the parent can sleep on in the same room as them. We talked a minute ago about separation anxiety being quite a prevalent thing in the toddler ages. So you often find that children who were okay being asleep in their own room all night actually go through periods where they don't want to sleep on their own all night. So some parents, if you need to go and spend time with your child through the night, make yourself somewhere that you can be comfortable and you can sleep, so that it's not breaking your back every time. So I don't think that's admitting defeat. I think that's giving your child what they need in that moment, but also yourself, so that you can get through the nights when it's really challenging. If you really, really don't want to do that, then you have to kind of practice some separation, and doing that in different techniques. So you might decide that you'll just sit there and shush because you've been doing those sleep cues and you've worked your way through to the point where it's the minimal level of intervention that you need. So you might go into the room and immediately start shushing before you do anything else and see if that works. Maybe just a hand on them or something like that will be enough. And then you can gradually go up your levels of sleep support to the point where you might need to pick them up and rock them or do something like that. But it is difficult for parents to extract themselves from the bedroom if your toddler has separation anxiety, because it is exactly the fear that they're anxious of, that you're going to disappear and leave them. So in my opinion, lean into it whilst your child is going through this development period. Lean into what they need for a while, and actually that secure attachment, that confidence that they have from knowing you are just always there without them needing to question it, we know that breeds independence later in life. So whilst lots of parents feel that responding to the child's needs as far as the separation goes sometimes is pandering to them or is going to make a rod for their own back in the future, actually what we know from attachment theory is that's not the case at all. And giving your child what they need in the moments that they need it is actually going to be more helpful in the long run. it's just really difficult for those periods of time where it feels very extreme, I guess. And a lot of this comes down to temperament, Alison. You know, some children will be okay with you just popping in, hand on the chest, give them a little kiss, and they'll be okay with you sitting there for a minute and then you can leave. Some children with more high needs temperaments, or who are really super persistent in their temperament, you're not going to get out of that room without a lot of upset. A lot of it does come down to the temperament of your child as well as the strategies you use and whether they can fall asleep independently. It's a really challenging part of parenting, I think, this part of the night where they're looking for support from you, but obviously that's difficult for you to give when you're tired.
So if I had to summarize so many of the juicy tidbits here, number one, we have to reset our expectations. We have to broaden what we think we know about how kids should be and understand these toddlers especially they're going to start having their own personality, and that personality is just going to be intrinsic to them. You birth someone with a unique personality, and no two kids are alike. And I can honestly say, having two girls, they are vastly different from each other in many, many ways. I mean, I never thought I'd have a 6-year-old who literally will put herself to bed when she decides that she's done for the day. I mean, it's hysterical. She's like, peace out, I'm out of here. But then again, Lily needed a little bit more coddling. So readjusting your expectations. And then I love what you said about the fact that toddlers really need to feel secure. They do go through separation anxiety, which is completely normal and developmental, and it will be to different degrees depending on their temperament. I'm hearing you say that. So what is so key to allowing you to get them to sleep better is emphasizing that connection, and it's connection from the time they're home from daycare, school, what have you, to the time they go to bed. Fostering that connection. I think that's such wonderful advice, because often when we're really tired, we sort of retreat and we just need time for ourselves. And it's very hard to give that to them. But knowing that it will actually help you in the long run to invest that time. And that means, guys, modeling the kind of behaviors that you want your kids to see. You don't want them growing up going, okay, when I get my phone, then I'm just not going to pay attention to you because I'm going to be in my phone the whole time. You want them to feel that you really care about them and you're present for them. And trust me, even with my older kids, sometimes the cartoons, oy vey, it's just so hard. It's so hard to my brain, some of the cartoons. I really got to be patient with myself. But I really set aside the phone, and that was a conscious effort. I was not always good at that. So I simply love that. And then what I'm hearing from you is enjoy the time with them. This is a transient period in their life. This too shall pass. And if you create routine, you create boundaries, even if it's hard or they're pushing back on it, in the long run, you're investing in their future, just how they develop and having them be secure and confident little beings that we all want them to be. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. You've nailed it. Yeah.
So, guys, I do want to point out, because, being a sleep doctor, I can't help but nerd out on some of the sleep disorders that sometimes you might start to see rear their heads in toddlerhood. We can talk for hours on this, so I just want to point out that what Jemma is saying is going to work for a lot of kids. If you're noticing snoring, if you're noticing some really unusual behaviors, they seem too tired, they seem overtired, they're cranky, if you think there's something funky going on with their breathing, or they're really kicking their legs a lot, sometimes we have OSA or obstructive sleep apnea or restless legs. So these are just things, again, in the back of your mind. I'm not saying you need to go straight to a sleep specialist. You might want to try a lot of these behavioral things too, but always advocate for your child. If you think there's something beyond just behavioral tools like what Jemma is talking about, seek that expertise. People are there. There are a lot less of us than there are people in the population, but that doesn't mean we care any less about you, and we want to hear about this. So don't ignore it or try to put it under the rug. Don't be afraid to say, something's up and I want this checked out. That's okay too. So that's just my final parting words. Jemma, this has been super, super fun. I have learned seriously a ton. Thank you for sharing your expertise quite literally with the world. It's been a real pleasure. And congratulations on your book again. And guys, you're going to see the link for her bio. And Jemma, if you have a link where people can purchase your book, please share that with me, and I will include that as well in the bio. Again, you can check us out on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Thank you again. This is so fun.
Thanks for having me, Alison.
Disclaimer. The statements made on this podcast have not been evaluated by the U.S. Food or Drug Administration. They are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. The information provided by this podcast should not be used as individual medical advice. While I am a practicing sleep provider, I am not your sleep provider. You should always consult with your personal healthcare provider for individual recommendations and treatment.